Chapter 51. Please read it. The most vicious cat meets a dragon. You are listening at MaleProtagonist Audio. Black Cat, is there something wrong with these Marines? Fishing Kitten stood at the stern of the ship and looked at the naval fleet that was still chasing after him. He asked a strange question to the phone bug in his hand, because he only had this feeling subconsciously. What is the specific meaning? Not coming out, at this time, he needs a three-legged cat, who is slightly smarter than him to answer his questions. It's Cannonball Meow. Sure enough, the black cat did not disappoint him this time. He looked like the phone bug of their third sibling brother, and his face looked very serious. Those navies are gradually reducing the frequency of artillery fire, meow. The three-legged cat, who was also standing at the stern of the black ship, was talking and thinking about the problem in confusion, but the fishing kitten opposite showed a happy face and laughed. Are they running out of shells soon? The former immediately shook his head and rejected this possibility. This is impossible. Everyone knows that the Navy in the South China Sea ranks second among the four seas in terms of wealth. To them, artillery shells are no different from the bullets in our eyes. At this moment, as the last roar exploded in the sea not far away, the whole world suddenly became quiet, and the sound of waves lapping on the deck became the main theme again. Black Cat, they ceased fire, meow, the white cat fishing kitten shouted in surprise. Due to the short distance between the two ships and the stoppage of the artillery, the black cat three-legged cat could faintly hear it even without going through the phone bug. It's strange, it's so strange. We are obviously still a long way away from the upside-down mountain, and these navies still have no intention of catching up. The latter looked at the surrounding sea and found that he and others were once again surrounded by three parties, but the warships were just following quietly. Tap 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 tap. Just then, a rush of footsteps quickly approached from behind the three-legged cat, As he turned around to look, he found a crew member running in front of him with a panicked face, opening his arms and shouting, "Captain! There is also a Navy in front of us. And, special, no, super huge." At the same time, the same situation was happening on the white ship side. The next moment, the black cat and the white cat turned into vague afterimages at an extremely alarming speed and rushed from the stern to the bow. They also saw 5 incredibly large and terrifying warships approaching from the front. Then, what is that thing? The white cat fishing kitten opened his mouth and murmured in disbelief. Because he is a user with the cat fruit ability, his visual ability is very strong, so he can see more clearly than ordinary people. The warships in front are visually several times larger than those of the Southern Navy warships in the back, especially the caliber of the triple turrets above are very scary. If my guess is correct, it should be the legendary warship of the Navy headquarters, right? The three-legged cat answered the other party with a pale face. Navy headquarters? Yeah, I really didn't expect that the nobles of the South China Sea are so capable that they actually invited the Navy from our headquarters to catch us. The three-legged cat had a complicated mood at this time. I feel both desperate and inexplicably flattered. After all, looking at the entire pirate group in the South China Sea, no one has attracted the attention of the Navy headquarters. From this point of view, they are still quite powerful. Hey, what am I thinking about right now, Naya? Opposite, Dorag on the warship received a question from the lower-level Marines about whether to fire cannons. His answer was of course no. With the cannons of these headquarters-level warships, as long as one shot hits, the other side's ship will basically stop. Then how to practice? Rear Admiral Ivan, I'll leave this to you. You can notify the warships of various departments in the South China Sea to go back. By the way, I would like to express my gratitude and hard work to them. No problem, I'm looking forward to your performance. Major General Ivan smiled gently. Performance? Dorag glanced at the other party in confusion, but at this moment, the familiar sound of cannon sounded again, followed by 2 sharp sounds of breaking through the air. The two looked up and saw 2 red-hot shells approaching at high speed. Hey, I didn't expect that the pirates in the South China Sea are quite brave and actually rushed towards us. Major General Ivan raised his eyebrows and said with some surprise, at the same time, Dolag transformed into a light green whirlwind and soared into the sky. The raging wind blew the justice coat on Major General Ivan to the ground. Is this the ability of the natural hurricane fruit? It's a bit cool. The latter looked at the flying green whirlwind with envy in his eyes. On the Black Cat pirate's ship, the phone bug in the hands of the three-legged cat showed a fierce expression. Don't worry about the headquarters and divisions. Since there is no way to retreat, the only way to survive is to fight. After all, the opponent is only 3 warships. Even if they are bigger, they will only have several times more people to survive. Fight them. Meow. Hearing the words of catching a kitten, the three-legged cat had to admit that the other party was more courageous than him in this situation, and he was indeed able to do so. At this moment, he has completely realized the intention of the South China Sea Navy. It is not to force them to approach the Great Route, but to force them in front of the fleet of the Navy headquarters. You're right, sometimes you have to fight hard when you should fight hard, and now is such a time. Meow. After saying that, the body of the three-legged cat changed dramatically at a speed visible to the naked eye. His size was rapidly expanding, thick white-yellow fluff grew from his pores, the tips of his ears were rounded and blunt, and his pupils turned light green. This is the beastman form of the animal cat fruit palace cat form. The palace cat, also known as the rabbit cat, is recognized as the most powerful cat with the most ferocious personality. It lives in cold areas. It is said that they have not evolved much in 5 million years, so they have retained their most primitive form. Get ready to fight. Meow. The three-legged cat shouted at the surrounding crew members, his voice becoming more rough than before. Meow. Nearly 300 crew members of the Black Cat Pirates and the White Cat Pirates roared and meowed in unison, not only to cheer for the upcoming battle, but also to express their trust in the strength of the 2 captains. These are 2 devil fruit users, what are they afraid of? But the next moment, some people discovered that the shells fired by their side were shot back in midair. The 2 dark shells were getting bigger and bigger in their eyes. Careful. The shrill screams made all the pirates on the 2 ships notice this. Swish. Fortunately, the captain they had always trusted did not disappoint. I saw 2 afterimages, 1 white and 1 black, jumping over the tall mast. As the sharp cat's claws tore through the air, the 2 cannonballs flying back home were cut into 3 pieces and passed the ship on the sea in the blink of an eye. They all blew themselves up. Wow! Such a stunning scene made the pirates on both ships immediately excited. This is how they react every time they see the 2 ships tearing apart cannonballs with their hands. But the faces of the three-legged cat and fishing kitten, who fell back on the deck, did not relax at all. Instead, they became more vigilant and nervous, because they knew very well that it was impossible for the cannonballs to fly back on their own. So for something so contrary to common sense, as a devil fruit user, the first thing they could think of was the ability of the devil fruit. In addition, as a person with animal-type abilities, he is more sensitive in terms of sixth sense, and the unprecedented strong sense of crisis in his heart is even more shocking. Wow! Suddenly, a strong gust of wind rose on the deck of the black ship, blowing up a dozen pirates whose expressions changed greatly. Then in the area that was suddenly cleared, a tall and strong naval officer stood in the wind. Appeared in Chapter 52. Please read it. The Wind Dragon's Chant Swallows 2 Cats. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Although Dorag's appearance was shocking enough, the Black Cat pirates on the ship were all elites from the South China Sea and had rich fighting experience. After a brief surprise, someone around them pointed their guns at them and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Boom! The first loud gunshot directly kicked off the battle, and more gunshots rang out from all directions, with dense bullets splashing like heavy rain. Seeing this, Dorag frowned slightly and stopped his subconscious instinct to use domineering force. For him, if he uses domineering force or 2 strong physical skills, this battle will lose its meaning. He must ensure that he only uses the ability of the hurricane fruit to deal with it. In an instant, a rain of bullets came close, but they were blocked by a slowly flowing light green whirlwind that appeared out of thin air around Dorag. The bullets that had lost their strength clattered to the ground. It is indeed a devil fruit power, but it looks very different from us, Naya, that I saw, Fishing Kitten jumping over from his white boat at some point, squatting on the mast of the black boat and looking down at Dolag. He and the three-legged cat came from the lowest level of the South China Sea, so they did not receive any good education. They were only taught how to write for 3 years by 2 kind old men, and had no chance to learn about devil fruits. Therefore, they had no idea about devil fruits. Understanding is limited to knowing that it is the secret treasure of the sea. In addition, I had only heard of, but never seen, other devil fruit users in the South China Sea, so I thought they all had different animal forms like the two of me. He seems to be able to turn into the wind and control the wind. The cannonball just now must have been blown back by him with the wind. Look carefully, meow. The black cat, three-legged cat, reminded the opponent with a serious look, while carefully observing the opponent's battle. At the same time, the black cat pirates on the deck saw that the musket fire was useless, and the surrounding pirates holding steel knives, daggers, and long swords showed the most ferocious expressions and attacked. Sure enough, this time, the suddenly appeared Navy man could no longer stand still and ignore the attack. Instead, he followed the green wind and moved among the crowd with extremely ethereal movements, dodging sword slashes and sword thrusts from all angles. Occasionally, when people feel that the weapon touches the entity, it is just a layer of translucent atmosphere. Dorag, on the other hand, resisted the urge to fight back, coping with the siege of the pirates while feeling the power of the wind. At this time, if he was seen by Major General Irvine, he might think that the former was using the hockey of knowledge, but this was just sensing the flow of air, coupled with the performance of semi-elemental form from time to time. Dorag felt that, since he was already a natural ability user, he had to get used to using the elemental characteristics as soon as possible. The trick used at this moment has been named Wind Dragon Shelter, in my heart. The wind blessing on the body can not only improve agility and speed, but also provide protection and airflow perception. It seems to be a quite comprehensive auxiliary skill, but it's not just that either. Wind Dragon. But the next moment, the green wind that had been quietly circulating around Dorag suddenly became violent. More wind force surged out to form a spiraling wind dragon, which swept nearly 100 pirates on the deck high into the sky. That this was not over yet. The pirates who were shrouded by the strong wind began to see dense bloody cuts on their bodies. The severe pain caused by torture was like being cut into pieces with 1,000 knives, causing them to scream and scream out of instinct. Oh my God, what the hell is this? Fishing Kitten instantly appeared next to three-legged cat, looking at the wind dragon circling around a tornado in disbelief, with Dorag's figure looming in the eye of the wind. As soon as the wind dragon appeared before, the animal instinct was frantically warning the former. Fortunately, he obeyed the instinct and jumped down as fast as possible. Otherwise, he would probably be cut by the wind now. The three-legged cat didn't respond to catching a kitten because he didn't know what to say. Dorag's ability was so amazing that he didn't even know how to deal with it. 10 seconds later, as the wind dissipated, the black cat pirates, covered in bruises and bloody mouths, fell like dumplings one after another. Some of the unlucky ones fell directly into the ocean. The most astonishing thing was that a huge hole appeared on the deck, which was where Dolag stood. However, he did not fall, but floated there out of thin air, with a much smaller wind dragon walking beside him. What made the three-legged cat and Fishing Kitten most nervous was that Dorag's eyes were focused on them, which made the two of them assume a feline-like alert posture. However, the latter had no murderous intention towards these two cats. He had already learned about their information on the way here. For pirates like this who only targeted nobles, did not do anything to civilians and did not kill many, they still had to be caught, but there was no need to kill them. But they kept staring at people, and finally the three-legged cat and the Fishing Kitten couldn't hold back anymore. In line with the idea of strike first, they rushed towards many people at almost the same time without any words or eye contact. Ragu, the ability users in African lion cat form and palace cat form, one on the left and one on the right, were so fast that their bodies were blurred, and they didn't even have time to breathe. They approached Dorag in an instant. The 10-fingered cat claws that could cut through gold and iron clawed hard, but one attacked and the other attacked, and the cooperation was quite tacit. The black cat is clawing at meow. The white cat is clawing at meow. That at the same time, the wind dragon on Dorag roared out, and was good at facing the wind, and quickly transformed into a wind dragon that was more than 3 meters high and 10 meters long. It completely ignored the scratching of the three-legged cat, and instead knocked it away with one end. It came back as fast as it came, and then with a flick of the dragon's tail, it pulled back the fishing kitten on the other side. Boom! Boom! The two of them hit the side of the ship heavily one after another. They both spat out a mouthful of blood and looked in horror at Dorag, who slowly floated in front of them, and the wind dragon that was swimming in mid-air and staring at them. In fact, as an animal-type ability user, although the wind dragon's attack is heavy enough, it will not lose its combat ability, but the huge gap between the two sides is disappointing. Captain! Captain! At this moment, the crew of the White Cat pirates on another white ship stepped on the rope on the hook and ran over, gnashing their teeth and waving their weapons. They also saw the strength displayed by Dolag, but the two captains treated them well. Most of them had been oppressed and bullied by the nobles before. It was the captains who showed up and severely punished the nobles and brought them with them. Come out to the sea without worrying about food and clothing, and be free. So at this moment, even those Black Cat pirates who were cut by the tornado, as long as they had the strength to stand up, they all braved the pain and rushed towards Dorag with all their strength. Captain, take the white boat and run. Yes, run quickly, let's catch him. The pirates of the Black Cat and White Cat groups believe that with the strength of the two captains, they will be able to escape successfully. They are devil fruit users. You. Three-legged cat and fishing kitten had red eyes, but they did not choose to leave on their own. Instead, they stood up and roared towards Dorag with their crew members. We'll die together, meow. Dorag was also a little surprised when he saw this scene. He had met many pirate groups before, but he had never seen such a united pirate group, even willing to die for the captain. He became curious about these pirates. Forget it, let's lock you up first. Dorag felt that time had almost passed. The next moment, the wind dragon expanded violently, then exploded with a bang, turning into a raging green wind that swept everything around it, swallowing up all the pirates, and the two cats, and the white ship and the black ship were torn apart in the wind. Ouch! The faint roar of the wind dragon echoed across the sea. Chapter 53. Please read it. In trying to open the Star Gate for the first time. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. On the Holy Land Mariajoya side, after him sent the directions of the world government restructuring plan to the 5 old stars, their minds were greatly relaxed. What he wrote was actually not very detailed. He just briefly stated his thoughts, referencing many cognitions and experiences from previous lives. However, during the implementation process, Wulaoxing and elites from the administrative, financial and other industries in various sea areas need to study and discuss together. This is destined to be a long-term and extremely cumbersome matter. Fortunately, there are 4 years until the next World Conference, so they have plenty of time to prepare. At this time, Im was in the sage time after a busy period, and suddenly felt a little idle, even though his predecessor had spent hundreds of years like this. But he is not, he will be bored. I saw him lying on the sofa habitually, casually opening his golden finger star map, and suddenly a vast overhead view of the starry sky appeared in front of my sight. This is a small daily pleasure for him. He always feels that this real-time updated cosmic star map never gets tired of looking at it. It is extremely shocking. Especially when viewed from an overlooking perspective, it can satisfy his desire for control and stimulate his ambition for the sea of stars. In other words, he is the only one in Starfish who knows exactly what the shape of the universe is, while others can only guess. Im used conscious control to zoom in on the area where the starfish was located. After more than a dozen times of zooming in, a blue planet surrounded by 6 large and 2 small satellites and wearing a red ribbon finally appeared. This is the pirate world he lives in, called Starfish. What's interesting is that among these 8 satellites, the smallest one is a satellite of another satellite. The most incredible thing to him is that when looking up at the starry sky from inside the starfish, only the moon can be seen, but other satellites cannot be seen at all, even if some of these satellites are larger than the moon, and some are only smaller than the moon. It's as if they don't receive and reflect sunlight at all. Fortunately, I wasn't an astronomer and didn't worry too much about this. Instead, he slightly reduced the magnification of the star map, just enough to take in the full view of the galaxy where the starfish is located. Is there a total of 6 planets in one sun, including starfish, among which starfish seems to be the largest, and only starfish has satellites? Looked at every detail of the galaxy with great interest. Having said that, this starfish is indeed big enough. Each of the 4 sea areas in the east, west, north, and south look similar to the Pacific Ocean in the previous life. Because he stayed alone for a long time in Yujian, he unconsciously developed a habit of talking to himself. This was also the reason why he decided to go out for a walk. If he continued to stay like this, he would go crazy if not crazy. By the way, I remember that Enel in the original book also encountered the so-called space pirates on the moon, so there may be a lot of aliens active around here. Although judging from the content of the original work, there will be no scenes of alien invasion in the next 20 years, but who can guarantee that there will not be any in the future? Maybe because of his appearance, a few ships will actually fly down one day. Space battleships are not necessarily. As long as people are idle, their thoughts will begin to diverge, that is, their thoughts will wander. Suddenly discovered that he was not only facing conflicts within the starfish, but also threats from aliens, which made his slightly relaxed sense of crisis rise again. Also, the introduction of the star map does not guarantee whether there is civilization, so from another perspective, it can also be seen that there must be planets with civilization, and they are all in this universe. The star gate is just open, it's just a transmission channel under my control. So what would be the civilization on these planets? That he suddenly thought of a conjecture that made him a little scared and nervous. As a novel lover who has read a lot of online articles, we can make bold guesses based on the characteristics of this golden finger. Since the Japanese comic world of One Piece exists, is it possible that the world of other Japanese comic works also exists? Yes, isn't this the most common setting? Dadim stood up suddenly, because he couldn't sit still anymore, and hurriedly walked out of the tree house and looked up at the stars in the sky. At this moment, these beautiful stars gradually became scary in his eyes. If the guess is correct, then the universe he traveled to is too lively. The Otsutsuki clan likes to plant sacred trees on alien planets to swallow all life force and harvest chakra fruits. This is the first existence he thinks of, and then, the Scions. A race that specializes in conquering, plundering, massacring other planets, and then selling them to aliens on the other side. Isn't this the typical style of space pirates? In other words, if I sort out the internal conflicts of starfish and continue to stay at home, one day in the future, I will most likely see a few white spherical spaceships falling down. At this moment, was frightened by his own conjecture. Although his strength was the strongest in this world, in the world of Japanese comics, he didn't know what level he was at. He took a deep breath and thought to himself, no, I have to calm down. These are just my conjectures. The actual facts have yet to be determined. So how to determine? Im's eyes glanced at the prompt that can open 2 random small star gates. If you can follow a civilized planet, wouldn't it be enough to go in and check it out? Under the eyes of several nearby maids, he returned to the tree house again, then continued into the back bedroom and closed the door. Standing in front of the bed, Im touched his chin and continued thinking, what about after opening the star gate? According to normal development, you will probably have to choose between 2 styles. One is to venture into an unknown world alone, and then return to starfish with the harvest. The second is to jointly develop in the form of an organization. First send in some professional intelligence personnel, and after they bring back detailed investigation reports, the large forces will advance layer by layer, and at the same time cooperate or fight with the top leaders of another world. Both options have their pros and cons. The main problem with the first option is that the risk is higher, and its existence must be kept secret. This is not a good or bad thing. Also, the utilization rate of these worlds is definitely extremely insufficient, but it can solve the problem of staying at home. Boring situation between months. The second option is just the opposite, but it is destined to make the existence of the Stargate public. The first people who need to be informed must be the 5 old stars. Hey, I can open a star gate first, and we won't decide whether we can get in or not. That smiled excitedly, but his cold face remained for so long that even his smile became a little cold, but he stopped again just when he was about to make a move. No, what if there was some great master on the other side and he discovered it the moment he opened the star gate? It stands to reason that since it is a golden finger that comes with time travel, it must be very good, but this star map is not a system, so it is not necessarily very good. For a moment, was once again entangled. In the end, curiosity overcame caution. He carefully clicked on the first random small star gate and controlled the position 5 meters in front of him. Buzz, the next moment, a ray of starlight suddenly appeared, and then a rotating star cluster appeared. The star cluster quickly spread out, forming a long square door 3 meters high and 2 meters wide. At this moment, the dots of starlight on the surface of the long square door gradually dissipated into a picture of green mountains and blue sky, as if telling him that as long as he passed through this door, he could enter another world. So that's what happened. It's really a portal, but the wind and smell can't seem to come through. Looked at the world inside the door and murmured in a low voice, at the same time, a planet in a certain galaxy in the star map automatically lit up with golden light. Chapter 54. Please read it. World Government Restructuring Plan. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Just when fell into the biggest difficulty in choosing in the past month, the 5 old stars who were also in Ponjil Castle were sitting around the sofa in the Hall of Power and fell into collective silence, because they are digesting a large amount of information they have just received from the document directions of the World Government Restructuring Plan. There is really a lot of content, and the changes are shocking. After nearly 30 minutes of silence, the old star with a mustache who was sitting in the main seat was the first to speak. I think everyone has already thought about it, so let me talk about it first. That's fine. After all, Lord Im's restructuring plan is mainly aimed at your Government Affairs Council and Wulaoxing, who had a straight goatee, glanced at the Wulaoxing next to him who was wearing a flat hat and leaning on a cane. And my Court of Justice, right? The latter said with an obvious happy smile. In this regard, the former just nodded. According to Lord Im's plan, the size and power of the trial court will be greatly increased in the future. In that case, let me talk about the affairs of the Government Affairs Council. The 5 old stars with mustaches took over the conversation. According to this plan, the first step is to integrate outstanding administrative and financial talents from all over the world into the world government, and at the same time vigorously support the expansion of relevant professional schools, and then let these people study the specific matters of the restructuring of the Government Affairs Council. The document specifically mentions several heavy industrial countries in the North Sea. This matter requires your cipher poll to investigate. The blonde 5 old star nodded and said, no problem, I will make CP4 take it seriously. Good. The 5-character bearded star continued, I think Lord Im's restructuring request this time is more like refinement and expansion. Previously, there was only one administrative department under the Government Affairs Council, and then the administrative department assigned tasks to groups in various fields. Now, these groups have become department-level departments. Although they are still directly under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Administration, they are already formal departments, and there are also the Department of Religion, the Department of Health, and the Department of Academic Affairs. The responsibility of the Religious Department is to manage and supervise all religious organizations. In the future, those large and small religions must be standardized. The Department of Health is responsible for all matters related to medical treatment, drugs, and diseases in the world, including medical schools under construction. All hospitals, pharmacies, and medical personnel must be controlled. The last Secretary of Academic Affairs. At this point, he hesitated, but he continued after a pause. We must be responsible for all educational institutions, as well as supporting and establishing various schools. We must also supervise and support the establishment of schools in the franchised countries to ensure that citizens of all franchised countries receive basic literacy and mathematics education. With every word, the 5 old stars with mustaches can predict that these departments will require a large number of personnel and consume a lot of money. To be honest, he was confused. why should the world government do such laborious and expensive things? But he didn't dare to say or ask. However, there is nothing objectionable about this, because if it is really restructured like this, the size of the Government Affairs Council will be several times larger than it is now, which is equivalent to the power in his hands becoming larger. If nothing else, this religious minister will definitely become a giant in the future. There are so many people who believe in religion in the world. It's not easy. Your Government Affairs Council needs too many people. Goatee Wu Laoxing sighed, but there was no envy in his heart, although the scientific force and the department that controls history are also mentioned in this restructuring document. They are somewhat insignificant compared to the Government Affairs Council and the Tribunal. In fact, the current science team, although Dr. Vegapunk has joined it, does not have any mature works that are too eye-catching, so the sense of existence is very weak. There is still room. I counted. According to the restructured structure, there are 12 departments under the administrative department. The office space required by so many people is not much smaller. The 5 old stars with flat hats also participated. The 5 old stars with mustaches agree very much with this. With so many people, they certainly cannot be placed in Mariajoya. After all, this is the Holy Land of the world. What will happen if it becomes too chaotic? In the past, there were not many officials in the world government, so they were able to accept it, but now they can't. At this moment, the blonde 5 old star suddenly spoke. Isn't it written in this document? Find a place on the Red Earth continent to build the headquarters of the new world government. From now on, this Mariajoya will only be used as a place where the celestial dragons live and hold world conferences. That he should be the most relaxed person now, because this restructuring did not mention Cipher Pole at all. To be honest, this is both a bit relieved and a bit disappointing. At the same time, as soon as these words came out, the 5 old stars with mustaches, goatees, and flat hats picked up the document and looked through it quickly, and they found what the other party said. There were really too many documents, and they were a bit confused. But for 800 years, there has been only one city in the Red Earth continent, Mariajoya. Isn't this? Goatbeard 5 Elder Star hesitated. He is responsible for matters related to history, so he is most sensitive and attaches great importance to this aspect. He feels that this somewhat violates the rules passed down from generation to generation. After the new world headquarters is completed, there must be more than 100,000 people, right? Isn't this a city? Since this is Lord Im's wish, I don't think there is any need to discuss it. To put it bluntly, what guarantees the status and privileges of us Tianlong people is not these superficial rules, but the absolute combat power and military power. The kimono-clad bald 5 old star, who had been silent all this time, glanced at the 4 people present with an expressionless expression as he spoke. This restructuring plan, in my opinion, not only makes the scale of the world government larger, but also the scope of power. This actually means that it has become stronger, and the power of the Government Affairs Council has become stronger. Exchanging these endless amounts of money and the false reputation of the only city in the Red Earth continent for substantial power and strength, is there any more profitable transaction than this? That his words made the 5 old stars with goatee fall silent. The other 3 nodded in agreement, especially the 5 old stars with mustaches. The corners of their mouths were raised, and they seemed to be in a good mood. That's it. When Cipher Pole's intelligence collection is completed, we will start to sign up for talents from various countries, and at the same time, let the administrative department start looking for a place to build the world government headquarters. Anyway, 4 years is more than enough time no matter what you do. The next step is my court of justice. I didn't expect that Lord M would pay so much attention to the judicial field. The 5 old star wearing a flat hat tapped his cane happily. The restructuring of the Supreme Court is not major. It is just that the names of some departments have been changed. The focus is on the Ministry of Justice. We are required to recruit legal talents from various countries to improve the outdated legal provisions that have been out of date for hundreds of years. We have also transferred the Bounty Department that originally belonged to the Navy. This reward department is mainly responsible for discussing, deliberation, deciding the amount of rewards for prisoners and issuing official reward lists. The bald old man in charge of the military had no objection to this, because he only valued the military's combat effectiveness, and issuing bounties was dispensable. At this time, the blonde 5-old star intervened and said with a smile, "I think it is a big deal for Master Emu to transfer the city of Impel down to the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Justice, but you have to pay for the wages and maintenance costs of Impel Down City. Ha ha ha, our trial court still has some money." The 5-old star wearing a flat hat was happy, and then glanced at the kimono wearing 5-old star sitting opposite, because this Impel City has always been a department directly under the Navy, but Kimono Wulaoxing nodded in support and said, "I think it's very good." Pushing forward the city was originally used to detain prisoners. From now on, the trial court will be responsible for guarding the prisoners. It is reasonable and reasonable. After all, he still despises the jailers in Impel Down City, and this also saves him from having to allocate money from the Navy military expenditure every year. It is really that the combat power of Impel Down City cannot be used. Although it is also an armed force, it is the army used for war is two different things, but he also noticed some of Lord Im's intentions, which was to deliberately reduce the scope of the Navy's power. Finally, there is the newly established Ministry of Police, which is at the same level as the Supreme Court and the Ministry of Justice. I find it very interesting. The 5-old stars with mustaches smiled at the 5-old stars with flat hats. Chapter 55. Please read it. Colonel Harros' quick wit and decision. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. South China Sea, Shigua Island, Naval Division 194 Base. The major ignored the salutes of the sailors on the way, hurriedly opened the door without knocking, and shouted to Colonel Harros, who was sitting behind the desk and just raised his head. The base commander, Major General Dorag, sent an order requiring us to arrive at the waters of the Kingdom of Thutmose within 2 hours to cooperate with the arrest operation. Huh? Didn't you say that the 2 cats have been caught? That the major's words were a bit hurried, and Colonel Harros was a little confused because he didn't react at first, but he immediately realized the crux of the problem. The sea area of Thutmose Kingdom, that he suddenly stood up from the sofa, put his hands on the desk, and asked in shock, "Why do you want to go there? And you just said it was an arrest operation, who are you arresting?" That the colonel actually had a vague suspicion in his mind, and an unknown feeling surged into his heart. The statement over there is to arrest King Taklama, the slave king of the Dark World, and conduct a thorough investigation of the entire kingdom of Thutmose, arrest all armed personnel, and if there is resistance, they are allowed to be killed on the spot. The major's face looked very serious. He was pale, with a little cold sweat on his forehead. Colonel Harros's face kept changing, but finally it turned into a sigh and said, "Did something happen? I'm so unlucky, that the previous base directors had all successfully made enough money to be promoted or retire. How could they be completely blown away when they arrived at his place? This was not bad luck. I really didn't expect that this fleet of the Navy headquarters was not here to catch any cats at all." Major General Dorag was aiming at the Thutmose Kingdom from the beginning. We were all deceived by him and wanted to come to Takla. King Ma's side is pretty much the same. The major asked in panic, "Colonel, let's do it now. Should we notify King Taklama immediately to prepare?" No. Colonel Harros was quick to think. Although his physical aptitude was not high, his brain was still good and he could think of various details quickly. The Navy headquarters is obviously well prepared this time. Rear Admiral Dorag's previous smoke bomb also shows that he is suspicious and wary of us in the South China Sea branch. At this time, there may be someone monitoring the phone nearby. Just wait until we fight over. The most important thing is that our 194th branch is closest to the waters of the Kingdom of Thutmose, and will probably be regarded as a key focus. At this time, we must not mess up, let alone have any contact with that place, and King Taklama is finished. It's completely over, what's the point of informing him? But the major was a little confused and asked, "Isn't it completely over? As far as I know, this slave king is very powerful and powerful. He has been a big figure in the Dark World for decades. Although the fleet of the Navy headquarters strong, but this time only 2 major generals came. "Humph," I said, "he is completely finished because his identity has been completely exposed, and the Navy headquarters is obviously going to ruthlessly deal with him. Compared to the world's strongest military organization, what is a slave king?" Colonel Ross looked at the major with disdain. "It's certainly scary for a big shot in the dark world to be in the dark, but once exposed to the sun, he'll be meat on the chopping board. Even if Taklama has the ability to defeat Rear Admiral Dolag's fleet, what if the Navy headquarters sends a stronger and larger combat force in the future? If nothing else, what if Lieutenant General Garp arrives?" After speaking, Colonel Harros said meaningfully to the major, "I think it should not be difficult to choose which side the slave king and the Navy headquarters are about to stand on. And I'm sure that even without us, there will be fools calling to warn the kingdom of Thutmose, maybe right now, and these people will become our scapegoats." The major calmed down after hearing this explanation, and then asked the last doubt, "If we have been suspected, we will definitely be held accountable. What should we do, base commander?" "There is a high possibility of being held accountable, but the crime does not lead to death. We have only been here a few years. If we really want to be held accountable, the previous base directors must be investigated one by one. On the contrary, if we are still trying to help Tok'ra King Ma, that is to bury him." As soon as he finished speaking, Colonel Harros straightened his suit and coat of justice, then picked up the phone and gave the order seriously, saying, "Send the order, and the whole ship will be ready to set off immediately. It must be done within the prescribed time. Arrive at the waters of Thutmose Kingdom within time." Then he quickly walked past the major towards the outside of the house, and the latter quickly followed behind him. "Basic Commander, how many troops will we send to each ship this time?" The branch's warships can normally carry 300 people, and when fully loaded, it can carry 500 people. The specific number of people depends on the situation. The remaining Navy is responsible for staying at the base. Fully loaded. Colonel Harros answered categorically that since he was determined to continue to stand in the Navy, he must show the greatest sincerity. He felt that this was the best way to save himself at this moment. Clear. 10 minutes later, the 8 warships of the 194th Division, which had been well prepared, quickly sailed out of Watermelon Island and headed towards the kingdom of Thutmose, fully armed. At the same time, the Navy headquarters fleet led by Dorag was less than 3 hours away from the kingdom of Thutmose. Major General Irvine walked out of the cabin and came to the deck. "Major General Dorag, you guessed it right. The people from CP2 just sent information. After receiving our order, the 242nd Division and the 289th Division immediately notified the Kingdom of Thutmose, but strangely there was no movement from the 194th Division, which was the closest. Instead, all the warships were sent with full force. Originally, after hearing the previous part, Dorag did not change at all and was still looking at the sea in the distance silently. But after hearing the second part, he subconsciously raised his eyebrows and turned to look at the other party. "I remember the base commander of the 194th Division was Colonel Harros, right?" "That's right. It seems that Colonel Harros is very smart." Dolag's mood was a little complicated at this time. He originally wanted to report it to the Navy headquarters afterwards and clean up all the corrupt Navy who were colluding with the slave king, but now Harros's performance is a bit difficult to handle, because he is in sharp contrast with the other 2 base leaders. In this way, I believe that the senior officials of Marina Fando will not embarrass the other party too much when they find out. At most of the bribed property will be confiscated, the military rank will be demoted, and the positions will be transferred. On the contrary, the 2 base commanders will be able to go to the Judiciary Island. It's time to meet Colonel Harros. Immediately afterwards, Dorag looked at Major General Ivan and asked, "How are the pirates doing?" The injuries of those who survived were not serious. The doctors on board the ship have taken care of it. However, the 2 captains are still in a coma. Their injuries are the most serious. However, the doctor said that they will not die. After all, he is a person with animal abilities, and his vitality is different from ordinary people. After speaking, Major General Ivan asked curiously, "Do you mean you are not going to send them to Judiciary Island for trial?" Well, I want to take Malinfando back to him and put him in the prison there first. Dorag didn't hide anything, he looked very upright, and said directly, judging from the fact that these pirates do not attack civilians, I don't think they are extremely evil people, and they will not be sent to the hell place of Impel City. I will consider it. Take them into the Navy and lead them yourself. So that's it. 2 animal-type ability users are indeed of great value. Once trained, they will be good combat power. Major General AI nodded and was not too shocked. There are many admirals in the Navy who will be accepted into the Navy as subordinates after catching pirates. Generally speaking, as long as they are not repeat offenders of the world government, the senior officials will turn a blind eye to this, but if it happens afterwards, if something goes wrong, the general will be held accountable. Chapter 56. Please read it. The Slave King's War Preparations. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. The Kingdom of Thutmose, as mentioned before, is a desert country, but it is different from Alabasta because it is located in the South China Sea and has normal seasonal changes, and its most beautiful season is winter. In winter, the entire island will be covered with snowflakes, covering the golden sand sea with a layer of ice and snow. The mixed scene of white and gold gives people a visual beauty. Although the entire kingdom is a medium-sized island, there is only one city called Shabak, or Sand City for short, a vast land with few people, a desert environment, and a city all give people the impression of being weak and poor. Even the pirate ships passing by are too lazy to come up and waste time, but what the world doesn't know is that beneath the surface capital of Shabak, there is an extremely wide underground space. The layers of buildings are flashing with bright yellow lights, and people are coming and going with shouts and screams. Wailing and crying, it seems that every air here is filled with despair and pain. I saw a soldier wearing a green collar, wearing a white robe, holding a whip, a tomahawk, a spear, or a musket, patrolling and guarding everywhere. Each of their faces had no expression and looked extremely terrible. Looking into the distance, you can see the tallest and eye-catching pyramid building, which is the real palace of the Kingdom of Thutmose. Just now, King Taklama, the famous slave king in the Dark World, had received news that the Navy's headquarters fleet was about to come to capture him, but there was no reaction from him sitting on the golden throne, and the senior subordinates below could not see the king's expression. Because King Taklama wears a golden mask on his face, and his clothes are more typical of the pharaoh style, with white robes, wide neck ornaments and a golden scepter in his hand. In the main hall made of huge stones, stood 4 senior officials wearing white robes, and a strong guard warrior stood on both sides. Your Majesty, do we need to prepare to evacuate? One of them hesitated and asked first. King Taklama, who was sitting on the throne, asked back. How many people, how much treasure, and how many ships can be evacuated in about 2 hours? The official hesitated and asked, then shall we notify the slave catchers outside to come back for support? No. King Taklama seemed to have his own ideas and rejected him immediately. The total number of slave catchers is only 10,000, and there are less than 2,000 here in the South China Sea. There are even fewer who can come back in a short time. It doesn't matter whether they come or not. Even if 10,000 people can come back, what's the use? They are not meant for combat. What do you mean? The official asked doubtfully. What I mean is that we must evacuate. Now that we have been brought to the light, we must find a way to return to the darkness. That the king of Taklama, who was decked out in gold, stood up from his throne, clearly revealing his 2-meter-tall strong body. His cold mask looked down at the 4 people below. But now the first fleet of the Navy has arrived at the door. If you want to retain most of your strength, you must defeat them first, and then escape into the darkness before the second batch of stronger fleets arrives. After listening, the 4 officials suddenly understood the thoughts of His Majesty the King. 2 hours is enough for us to prepare for war. At the same time, prepare the ships. After defeating the naval fleet, immediately transfer the large troops and all necessary supplies and treasures. Yes, Your Majesty. But do you bring those slaves with you? Another official asked, because for their Thutmose kingdom, slaves were the main source of income. Bring 50,000 of the best quality slaves, and let the rest sleep under this desert. It can be considered a good burial place. King Taklama made the decision without mercy. Yes, Your Majesty. Again the officials responded in unison, and no one said a word for the abandoned slaves, for if they dared to speak out, they would immediately become one of them. Have you found any information about Major General Dolag and Major General Ivan? King Taklama asked. Your Majesty, Major General Ivan, according to the information from the slave catchers on the Grand Line, is a very outstanding swordsman, but other than that, there is nothing noteworthy. Instead, Major General Dorag it needs your attention. Oh, he is an esper. No, the information the slave catchers found is that he is a person without abilities, but his identity is very special. Tell me. Yes, Major General Dolag, whose full name is Monchi D. Dolag. He is the son of the naval hero Lieutenant General Monchi D. Karp. It is said that this is the first time he has led a large-scale military operation as the chief officer. Task. Hearing Garp's name, King Taklama's eyes became solemn under the golden area. As the saying goes, the ignorant are fearless, but as the slave king of the dark world, he knew many things that ordinary people could not access. Most civilians believe that the reason why Garp is called a naval hero is because he has been hunting down the Roger pirates for a long time and forced them into desperate situations several times. In the end, he personally arrested and sent them to the execution stand, but the king knows very well that this is not the case, or this is not the main reason. According to his guess, the strength of Lieutenant General Garp may still be higher than that of the naval admiral with the title of Buddha's Warring States. Have you found out where Lieutenant General Garp is now? That the minister in charge of intelligence replied respectfully with a look of awe. The slave catchers have not found a specific location. It is said that Lieutenant General Garp has always been a loner. In the Navy headquarters, he can go wherever he wants. Where are the characters? But they said there are rumors that Lieutenant General Garp has recently returned to his hometown of Donghai. Yeah. King Taklama breathed a sigh of relief, and at the same time thought, try to spare Dorag a small life in the subsequent battle. There is no need to completely panic Garp for this. If Garp could chase Roger to death for more than 10 years, then he would most likely pursue him for more than 10 years to avenge his son. He doesn't want to provoke a mad dog with the highest combat power in the world. Okay, let's all go down and get ready. Yes, Your Majesty. Soon, the more than 30,000 slave guards in the underground city of Thutmose Kingdom began to make big movements. They pulled out guns, ammunition, and even artillery in large quantities, and then reached the offshore area through underground passages and began to establish layers. Lines of defense and traps. The foundation of being a slave king for decades was completely activated at this moment. At the same time, groups of young men were pulled out of the cells. Under the guard of soldiers on both sides, they lined up to walk towards the Great Pyramid. They didn't know what King Taklama was going to do. In short, everyone knows that this is a war, with tens of thousands of people participating on both sides. On the sea, Dorag's side also met with the fleets of the 194th Division, the 242nd Division, and the 289th Division in the South China Sea. The naval fleet at this time was extremely large. 5 large headquarters-level warships, each carrying 1,000 headquarters naval personnel, 2 artillery decks, 3 triple anti-aircraft batteries, and a total of 33 large-caliber artillery pieces. The 18 division-level small warships all have 1 artillery deck and a total of 12 medium-caliber artillery pieces. Among them, 8 warships from the 194th Division are fully loaded with 500 people, and the remaining 10 are all regular 300 personnel. The total strength of the ship is 12,000. Although it seems to be inferior to the 30,000 legions of the Kingdom of Thutmose, in Dorag's view, his side is stronger than the former in terms of combat power and firepower. 1 major general and 50 headquarters officers at all levels who were proficient in the 6 styles and even some who had eaten devil fruits were enough to suppress the soldiers who were responsible for guarding the slaves all day long. As for King Taklama, he will naturally deal with it, although from the intelligence point of view, the slave king's strength in all aspects was superior to his own. Dolag did not feel the slightest fear because of this, when he thought that defeating the opponent would save hundreds of thousands of civilians, the blood in his body began to boil. This was the just battle he had always dreamed of. Target, the kingdom of Thutmose. Dorag flew in the air accompanied by a green whirlwind, and issued orders to the huge naval fleet composed of 23 large and small warships below. Set off. Chapter 57. Please read it. The whole army is mobilized. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it was the time when the sun was at its hottest. In addition, it was summer, and Thutmose Kingdom was a desert land, so the temperature in the entire area basically reached its highest point. The overly bright sunshine shines on the boundless sea outside, and you can even clearly see a layer of diffuse light mist. They are evaporating and distorting the light on the sea surface. At this time, on the horizon in the distance appeared blue warships with cannons and white sails hanging from seagulls. Taking the 4 largest warships as arrows, more than 20 warships spread out to cover almost the entire sea. They looked like heads. The sea beasts in the water ride on the wind and waves and rush across. The navy is coming. On an island in a sea of golden sand, the slave guards who were hiding in the cool tunnels, following this announcement to the entire army, picked up their firearms and ran to the trenches, staring at the naval warships that were approaching quickly. No one backed down, because they knew there was no way to retreat, and the green collars around their necks would not allow themselves to take a step back until they received the order to evacuate. But it's not without its benefits, at least. It allows them to exert 100% of their power. This is really a bit difficult to fight. Major General Ai-Wen was speechless looking at the golden world filled with sand and sea. Although he could indeed sense the auras of many people as he expanded his domineering power, he could barely see anything with the naked eye. Arrive. In this case, how should one's own warships be bombarded? At the same time, the huge fleet began to separate according to the original plan. Except for the headquarters warship he was on and 3 small warships from the 194th Division, the other warships were all composed of 1 headquarters warship, plus 5 the divisional warships are configured to sail to the other 3 directions of the kingdom of Thutmose. Their purpose this time is to capture the Taklama kingdom, thoroughly investigate all its forces, rescue all captured slaves, and of course carry out a comprehensive siege. Go get a piece of paper. Major General Ai-Wen ordered the marine soldier behind him to go over and wait for the latter to get a pen and paper, and then quickly recorded the deployment of troops on the island that he perceived. However, the range of his hegemonic power is not enough to perceive the entire island, so he only knows the general situation of the frontal coastal defense line. This is enough. Let them carry out artillery bombardment and troop deployment according to this map. Yes. The sailor took the paper handed over by Major General Irvine and quickly ran into the cabin to convey the order. The latter looked at the scorching sun above his head, which was still emitting endless heat and light, and remained silent. The war has begun. Boom. 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 15 minutes later, a large headquarters-level warship and 3 small branch-level warships took their positions and aimed their side beams at the golden sand sea on the island. The triple anti-aircraft battery on the bow of the former has been turned, and it is matched with the triple anti-aircraft battery on the side string, plus 12 large-caliber artillery pieces and 18 medium-caliber artillery pieces from the warships, a total of 36 artillery pieces, large and small. Launched a fierce artillery attack on the Slave Keeper Corps defense line along the coast. In an instant, the artillery fire roared, the smoke filled the air, and the flames shot into the sky. The dark shells filled with high explosives made bright traces in the high altitude, forming an extremely shocking fire coverage on the sand sea. The trenches on the island hidden under the sand layer were exploded time and time again and splashed with countless gravel. Some unlucky people were engulfed in fire or died on the spot in fear. Fortunately, most of the people hid in the tunnel in time, and the casualties were not large. However, the problem was that their artillery was unable to effectively counterattack due to range issues. The range difference between naval guns and ordinary artillery is huge, so the Slave Keeper Legion can only grit its teeth and endure the constant bombardment of the Navy. The Navy actually doesn't think shelling is of much use. The main purpose is actually cover the large troops landing on the island to seize the beach. I saw small wooden boats carrying groups of sailors holding guns and carrying long knives. They took advantage of the fire suppression of their own fleet and rushed towards the island as quickly as possible, but when they got closer to the beach, what followed was an artillery attack from the slave keeper corps and a hail of bullets. These sailors, either from the headquarters or from the branch, must bravely attack. To be honest, this will cause huge casualties, but this is an inevitable process. And it is also the promotion path for all sailors, in the Warring States period, Garp. Zifa, and even Lieutenant General he, who didn't fight like them with guns and knives, with cannonballs on their heads and bullets around them. As long as they can survive on the battlefield, their military ranks will be promoted, they will gain military exploits, and they will have the opportunity to gain access to more advanced swordsmanship, physical skills, and even redeem devil fruits. Therefore, this war is an opportunity for many people. At the same time, the slave keepers' corps had to come out of the tunnels and return to the trenches because they needed to block the Navy's approach to landing. This requires facing artillery bombardment from 4 warships at sea. With Major General Irvine's humanoid radar, the fire coverage can be said to be quite accurate. For a time, the casualty rate of both the Navy and the slave guards began to increase rapidly. Nonetheless, looking down from a high altitude, it can be clearly seen that as more and more naval forces set foot on the beach, the distance between the two sides is shortening at a speed visible to the naked eye. Most of these are sailors from the Navy headquarters. Their high-intensity training and rich combat experience are fully demonstrated as soon as they step ashore. Day after day, he did 2,000 push-ups, climbed a high-altitude rope 100 times, and circled a large playground 200 times. It was a practical training that required him to completely collapse from exhaustion. It can be said that every sailor in the Navy headquarters was capable of killing tigers and bears in Im's previous life, and their physiques were extremely superhuman. In comparison, the sailors from the 194th Division were very different. They were basically the ones who were shot to death. The entire Thutmose Kingdom's southeast, northwest, and coastlines were now transformed into the most brutal battlefield. But the strange thing is that the leader Dorag has not been seen yet, and even his flagship is nowhere to be seen. In fact, King Takrama, who was sitting on the golden throne in the pyramid, was also puzzled by this. He looked at the real-time battle scenes projected by several video phone bugs in the hall, but he didn't see a naval commander wearing a justice coat. They were all white shirts and blue trousers. Occasionally, some people wearing navy vests appeared. But those who hold on to death are just lieutenants. You know, in order to guard against these masters from the Navy headquarters, he has also prepared a group of elites to be sent to various defense lines, but now there is not a single coat to be seen. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. At this moment, a senior official ran in with all his strength, and then fell down on the cold stone floor with a thud. Even so, he didn't care and shouted breathlessly. No, Your Majesty, Shabak above us is being bombarded by the Navy. Nonsense. King Taklama stood up angrily and looked down at the other party coldly. We are inside the sand island. No matter how far the warship's range is, it can't reach here. But those warships came from the sky, and they were bombarding us from the sky. What? King Taklama suddenly raised his head. Although there was only a flat ceiling visible to his naked eyes, he was sensing upward silently at the fastest speed. At the same time, just as the official said, a large headquarters-level warship was floating in the sky surrounded by a green whirlwind, with both sides of the ship firing at Sabak below. Dolag stood at the top of the mast, the justice coat behind him whistling in a strong wind. The whole army is dispatched. Following his order, a large number of naval officers who had been preparing to attack on the deck flew up like ferocious white eagles, rushing towards the sand city in all directions. Kill. Chapter 58. Please read it. The Slave King's Ruthlessness and Strength. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. 50 officers from all levels of the headquarters, wearing righteous coats and walking on moon steps, turned into white afterimages and dispersed at an astonishing speed. For a time, the entire city of Shabak was filled with gunshots and fighting, and it was completely plunged into chaos. I saw a major who was the first to encounter a team of 5 slave guards. He had no intention of landing. Instead, he walked left and right in the air, dodging all the bullets. and then appeared in front of him with a sword drawn. Behind the 5 people, the next moment, a line of blood slowly appeared on the necks of several people, but the major did not even glance at their fallen postures, and once again attacked the next group of targets at high speed. On the other side, a colonel with bare hands smashed the tomahawk in front with one punch, and then hit the opponent in the face, causing him to fly out with white eyes, knocking over 3 guards along the way. Slave. Iron. Suddenly, the colonel tensed up and withdrew the attack from 2 long knives and several rounds of bullets. Then he grabbed the head of one of them without any damage, used him as a weapon and whipped the other person away, and finally threw it at him like trash. The slave guard who fired the gun threw it over, and both of them vomited blood and crashed through an earth wall before disappearing. Although there were many slave-keeping warriors in the kingdom of Thutmose, and some even held firearms, they could not stop the massacre of these white eagles: shave, moon step, pointing gun, orchid kick, paper painting, iron block. These physical skills that can only be practiced beyond the limits of the human body will produce amazing results every time they are performed. Some people even have superb swordsmanship or possess some kind of strange devil fruit ability, although some naval officers noticed that the strength displayed by these slave keepers wearing green collars was somewhat different from ordinary people, and some outstanding ones seemed to be comparable to the staff sergeants and sergeants of the headquarters, but to them, whether it is a sailor or a sergeant, there really is not much difference. Not to mention that these slave keepers are just physically different from ordinary people. In other aspects, they cannot be compared with the Navy soldiers of our headquarters. Groups of slave-keeping warriors ran out of the tunnels, but soon they were easily wiped out by a fleeting white shadow, turning into corpses lying in a pool of blood. 4 or 5 naval officers have even started to join forces to fight back into the underground passage. One of them, a burly major, was seen rushing forward at an extremely agile speed. A group of newly emerged slave guards had their necks and chests sliced open under the streaks of green light. Hey! Is this the ability of Major Jack's bug fruit mantis form? It's really fast and his arms are sharp. Another lieutenant colonel smiled boldly. It made Lieutenant Colonel Lei Fan laugh. Major Jack replied politely. Let's go quickly. If we can find King Taklama first, it will be a great achievement. Another lieutenant colonel, who wrapped his fists with white bandages, urged, and then continued to advance deeper. Hearing this, the other people stopped joking and started to move quickly. However, within a few seconds, there was a heavy impact in front of them, and then the bandage commander flew back, but it didn't seem to be anything serious. The balance was quickly restored. What's the situation? What's wrong? Just when Major Jack and others were asking questions, a large number of figures shot out from the darkness, giving Lieutenant Colonel Bandage no time to answer. Seeing this, the former stopped talking nonsense and quickly got entangled with them, starting a high-speed fierce battle in the narrow tunnel space. However, during the fighting, these masters of the Navy headquarters were beaten back. Although there are many people on the other side, compared to the previous slave guards, the strength of this group of black shadows is indeed extraordinary. In desperation, Major Jack and others could only exit the tunnel, and then quickly distance themselves to join more colleagues around them. At the same time, with the bright sunshine, they finally saw each other's appearance clearly. What are these guys? That I saw hundreds of figures pouring out of the underground passage, and each of them was wearing a black breastplate, a white robe and skirt, and holding 2 long-handled iron axes in their hands. Of course, the green collar around the neck is standard. The most shocking thing is their physical condition. The muscles all over their bodies are so swollen that they give people a sense that they are about to explode. Moreover, the surface of their skin is covered with light black markings. Their eyeballs are almost completely white and are basically invisible. The pupils only have a faint circular outline. As soon as these strange guys appeared, they formed groups in 2s and 3s and pounced on various naval admirals. Although they did not know the skills of shaving and moon walking, their extremely tyrannical strength could crush rock formations with just one step on the ground. He jumped up with bursts of sound piercing the air. Clang. There was an extremely crisp sound of metal clashing, and a major's long knife collided with the incoming iron axe. Suddenly, terrible power suddenly erupted, and cracks appeared in the sand under the feet of the 2 men. What a powerful force, that the headquarters major only stood in a stalemate for a few seconds before he had to step back to release his strength. Feeling the slightly numb palms, he felt incredible in his heart. Although his strength is not in strength, he will not be suppressed by the people in Nanhai, and the other party is not an animal-type ability user. At the same time, other admirals also felt the pressure. Although it cannot be said that the battle was difficult, it was indeed not as easy as before. However, some powerful people who were used to being tough in tough-faced situations with stronger strength and more people than them, and gradually suffered varying degrees of injuries. High in the sky, Dorag, standing on the mast of the warship, saw this scene with solemn eyes. Ha 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 ha. In the underground pyramid palace, King Taklama, who was wearing a golden mask, laughed heartily while looking at the images, and his laughter continued to ripple in the empty hall. The strongest guard warrior, 100% physical strength, coupled with the medicinal effect of luxury water, the effect is really good, but it is a pity that they are disposable weapons, and the reserve of luxury water is too small. A closer look revealed that the hundreds of soldiers who were originally guarding the hall were now gone. Hearing what he said, it turned out that all the guards were sent as victims in order to resist the 50 generals brought by Dorag. Got out, of course. Normal guards cannot be the opponent of the elite navy, but this slave king of the dark world took out the luxury water from the warehouse and let them drink it. Although the medicinal effect of Hao Shui only lasts for 5 minutes, and the person who takes it will die suddenly after 5 minutes, it can exert several times its power within these 5 minutes. The current king of Taklama regrets most that he did not prepare enough luxury water in advance. It is really because Dolag's previous smoke bomb was too successful, and he never thought that he would be discovered. This Garp's son is actually an ability user, and he also came up with the tactic of gathering all the elites to attack from the sky. It's really interesting. King Taklama was seen standing up slowly while holding the golden scepter as he spoke. Under the stage, an official in a white robe fell there with an extremely horrified expression. Judging from the hands that had not been lowered from his neck, it seemed that he had strangled himself to death. This person is the one who said before that Dorag was not an Esper. It stands to reason that this information was sent by the slave catchers on the Grand Line, and he was only responsible for relaying it, but the slave king was not interested in distinguishing right from wrong. However, let me teach you how powerless the so-called tactics and strategies are in the face of absolute strength in this world where power is paramount. Suddenly, his palm holding the scepter burst into green light, and the next moment, turbulent wind and sand poured out from all directions and swept through the entire hall. When all the wind and sand disappeared again, the king in front of the golden throne disappeared without a trace. Chapter 59. Please read it. The Mystery of the Slave King's Ability. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Puff. A flash of bright sword light flashed diagonally, and the blood of the 3 white-robed warriors wearing green collars in front of Colonel Harros spurted out. A long bloody gash was opened from their shoulders to their abdomens. The sudden severe pain made them collapse. He was wailing wildly on the ground, but he could only die as more and more blood soaked the red gravel. The base commander of the 194th Naval Division stationed on Shigua Island glanced at the surrounding battle situation with a heavy expression. At some point, the bombardment from both sides had ended. As a large number of naval forces rushed to the trenches of the Slave Keeper Corps under the hail of artillery fire and bullets, the form of the battle changed from hot weapons to a brutal fight with cold weapons, the collision of swords and axes, sparks flying, ferocious faces, bloody sand on the ground, crazy howls, and corpses everywhere. The entire coastal desert has been completely enveloped in the tragic atmosphere of this primitive fight. Initially, the Navy had the upper hand, but the troops on the slave-keeping side seemed to be endless, and young and strong warriors holding swords and axes would emerge from the tunnel at every moment. They are as strong as the sailors from their own headquarters. They are not afraid of pain and death. They fight extremely crazily. As long as their limbs can still move, they use their teeth and nails like the most fanatical death warriors to die like wild beasts that have lost their minds. Faced with this kind of opponent, even the well-trained Navy gradually became overwhelmed. As a last resort, the few senior generals who stayed on the warship had no choice but to land and join the battle. Not only Colonel Harros, but also Major General Irwin was killing the surrounding creatures from a distance with extremely high efficiency. Precisely because of their participation, the Navy finally stabilized the situation, but the follow-up troops of the Slave Keeper Legion continue to flow. This has exceeded the total troop strength of about 30,000 described in the intelligence. You must know that the Kingdom of Thutmose is fighting on all sides, and the royal capital also needs to stay part of the defense. Based on this calculation, the strength of each battlefield should be around 6,000 people. As for their navy, there are about 3,000 people. Logically speaking, the gap in strength is not very big, but now looking at the Sand Sea, they are all soldiers from the former. Just by visual inspection, it feels like it is close to 10,000 people. Damn it, those bastards CP2, there is definitely something wrong with this information. Colonel Harros was cursing angrily, and while seeing blood, he ran rampant on the battlefield, and there was basically no enemy wherever he went. Although he doesn't know the 6 styles, his swordsmanship can be considered superb. Coupled with the speed, reaction, and strength he has developed over the years, he is worthy of the coat of justice he wears. In addition, although Dolag took away all the generals from the Navy headquarters except Rear Admiral Ivan, he did not take away the lieutenants from the headquarters below, captains, lieutenants, second lieutenants, and warrant officers. All of these people were placed in the Seahai branch, and all of them were capable of guarding one side as a school officer. Some of them were even stronger than Colonel Harros. This is equivalent to hundreds of branch colonels, lieutenant colonels, majors, and colonels not wearing justice coats on the battlefield at this time. Although the Slave Keeper Legion has a large number of people, it is basically impossible to defeat so many naval masters in a short period of time, let alone a serious general like Major General Ivan. These guys are not soldiers. At this moment, a relatively dull Nanhai Marine thought he had discovered a shocking secret. He noticed that the soldiers on the Slave Keeper Legion side had gradually changed from their neat standard breastplates and white robes to tattered clothes that exuded a rotting stench, and the weapons in their hands were also in a mess. The only thing they have in common is that they are both very powerful and very dedicated. Shut up. At this time, a major from the 194th Division came over and yelled. In fact, someone has noticed this for a long time. Coupled with the clues about the Slave King in the Dark World, it is not difficult to guess that most of these people are slaves that we have come to save, but so what? On such a bloody and cruel battlefield where life and death must be fought, even if it is not clear why these slaves are fighting crazily for Thutmose Palace, as long as they swing their axes towards their own side, they are the enemy and can only be killed first. Let's explore the reasons later. At the same time, in Shabak City, which can really determine the outcome of the war, the huge warships in the sky have stopped shelling, because those ordinary slave guards who stayed behind had already been slaughtered by 50 naval officers. There was no need to further destroy the building, and it can easily affect one's own side. I saw the entire Sand City as a fighting arena. 50 Navy elites in white coats, using 6 forms, swordsmanship and devil fruit abilities, fought against the guards who were covered in black markings and looked like savage beasts. They fought fast, each transforming into incredibly fast white shadows and black shadows, fighting fiercely on rooftops, in alleyways, and even in the air. Due to the disparity in numbers, basically every general had to deal with 2 guards at the same time. Hao Shui's 5-minute duration seems short, but for this group of supermen, every minute is enough to fight dozens of rounds. They have strong physical strength, powerful strength, and superior speed. Even if an ordinary person is given a safe place to watch the battle, his naked eyes can only see fleeting afterimages. If the distance is closer, the eardrums will be damaged and ruptured by the continuous sonic booms, boom, boom. The earthen house that had been hit hard was collapsing, and the ground was full of pits. Every full-out attack was accompanied by thunderous sonic booms and roars. There were also constant shouts of death, clashes of swords and axes, and occasional screams of pain after being injured, which made people feel both frightened and excited. This is hell for the cowards, but heaven for the militants. Suddenly, a green whirlwind appeared in the sky. It turned out that Dorag couldn't hold back and finally took action. He didn't know what was going on with these black-striped guards, nor did he know that the effect of the high water was only 5 minutes. What he saw was that the elites he brought were constantly being injured. Although no one has been seriously injured or killed so far, he doesn't want to wait until there are casualties. In fact, Dorag had been waiting for the slave king, King Taklama, to show up, but after waiting and waiting, he didn't show up, so he wanted to deal with this group of weird violent warriors first. I saw that his whole body turned into a high-speed rotating tornado, like a huge auger. Wherever it passed, there was a bloody wind and a mess on the ground. The black-striped guard who drank the high water was so violent and powerful that he would die on the spot if he was scratched by the tornado. Whether alone, two, or in groups, this green tornado welcomes all comers. If you dare to rush up or if I catch you, I will kill you with 1,000 cuts. Invincible posture. Unstoppable. At this moment, Dolag vividly demonstrated the power of the top natural hurricane fruit in front of all the naval commanders, but what they don't know is that this is just a small test. After all, Dorag's fruit power has not yet awakened. The most terrifying thing about the natural system is that after it awakens, it can cause large-scale destructive power like a natural disaster. For him, who has just eaten the fruit for a year, this seems a bit far away. Crash, lala, lala. Just when the tornado transformed by Dolag was invincible in Shabak City, and the surrounding naval commanders showed excited smiles, a large cloud of yellow sand rushed out from the entrance to the underground space. Boom. The next moment, the yellow wind sand and the green tornado met violently, and an extremely violent wind wave swept across the entire place, pushing all the surrounding black-striped guards and admirals out of the central area of the Sand City, and then the entanglement of the two formed a huge wave. The salon volume soared into the sky, flying higher and higher, and soon passed the huge warship in mid-air. I didn't expect that you are actually a nature type. Do you want to be my slave? High in the sky, in a world filled with yellow sand and green wind, a voice mixed with excitement and joking sounded in Dorag's ears, but his attention was focused on one issue. What's the matter with this slave king's ability? Is he also a natural type? But doesn't the intelligence say that he is a superhuman type? Chapter 60. Please read it. Become the master of the world. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Although King Taklama wore a golden mask on his face, the look he was looking at Dolag under the mask was fiery. Before, he had thought about sparing Garp because he didn't want to offend Garp, but now, his mind has changed. This is a natural ability user. Is there a better slave than this one? He wants to turn Dorag into his slave and pet. For this reason, he is happy to have a deadly feud with Garp. The natural ability is so good. Besides, after fighting this battle, I will find a way to hide again and escape into the dark world. Then I can just hide from Garp and not be found by him, right? Thoughts flashed by. The golden scepter in King Taklama's hand was swung out hard, and a heart-stopping sound suddenly broke out, wrapped in an invisible layer of armed domineering force and heading towards Dolag's back. Dragon Hook Claw, that the latter reacted quickly when he noticed the crisis. His right palm became a claw with a layer of pitch black, and he forcefully received the opponent's fierce blow. Clang, the claw staff made contact, and the surrounding layers of wind and sand were swept away by a surging air wave, and the figures of Dorag and King Taklama appeared in everyone's sight, but before anyone could make a move, the former was shot away by the latter, and hit hard on the armor of the warship. Fortunately, the elemental passivity prevented him from suffering any subsequent damage, and he just dispersed into a ball of wind. Gathered into human form again. What a powerful, armed and domineering person. Dorag stared coldly at King Taklama, who was standing in mid-air on a ball of khaki sand at his feet in the distance. The blow just now was enough for him to notice the gap between the two sides. Although the latter's level of armed domineering was not enough to crush him, he was still better than him, but he had already been mentally prepared for this. No matter what, the other party was also the slave king of the dark world. It would be strange if he didn't even have this strength, but so what? Hoo. Dolag's body shook, and he was surrounded by whirlwinds. His whole body turned into a green rainbow, and he charged brazenly. In this regard, the latter naturally had no reason to give in. The golden scepter in his hand was also hardened with a touch of black, and he waved it with an extremely exquisite technique, sending out streaks of black light, and then more wind and sand poured out from under his feet to greet him. The green whirlwind collided with the earthy yellow sand again, but they were just a gorgeous background at this time, and the fight between claw shadows and scepters in the sky was the protagonist. Ding, clang, and messy metal symphony resounded throughout the sky above Shabak. The sonic boom erupted during each confrontation rippled across the entire venue, and the circles of air waves visible to the naked eye were like air turning into water waves. During the fierce battle, although there was no time to speak at all, King Taklama admired Dorag's physical skills very much. He secretly thought, he really deserves to be Garp's son. At this moment, the better Dorag performed, the happier the slave king was. Before, he had thought that the former was just a major general, and had no other strengths except for his natural abilities, but after such a confrontation, it was immediately judged that Dorag's strength, let alone a major general, was much stronger than the vice-admirals he had ever come into contact with. It's just not enough. If you want to defeat yourself, your current strength is still far away. King Taklama laughed wildly in his heart. The next moment, a bright green light glowed in his free left hand. Compared with the green color of the whirlwind around Dorag, the green light on his hand looks more coquettish and weird, making people frown at just a glance. Dolag, who was trying his best to resist the golden scepter, sensed the approaching crisis in his consciousness. This was a warning from the domineering spirit. Without any hesitation, he directly dispersed the elements into wisps of wind and retreated quickly. In the process, Dolag, who turned into the wind, also saw the source of the crisis, a green ring that flew past his position a second ago like lightning. Sure enough, your ability is a superhuman pet fruit. There is no problem with the information. Dorag looked as cold as ice, but he was also a little scared in his heart. If he had just been trapped by the ring, he would be finished now. Armed hockey can indeed compete with devil fruit abilities, but only if the former's level is higher than the latter's development level. Otherwise, it will only be broken through by the latter's abilities and then be tricked. With the strength of the slave king in front of him, Dorag really didn't dare to gamble, so he must be careful about the sneak attack of the green ring, and avoid it if he can. Ha 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 ha. Hearing Dorag's words, King Taklama opened his left palm that glowed with green light and let out a perverted and arrogant laugh. Yes, this ability is great. It can make everyone become my slave. Soon, you will also become my slave, the best slave. Dorag showed no anger at the slave king's words, but continued to ask indifferently, then what's going on with your ability to control wind and sand? That while he was talking, his sense of hockey was also looking around, because he suspected that the other party used the pet fruit's ability to control a person with abilities who could control wind and sand. Well, it's inconvenient to tell you. After all, as a king, mystery is also a must-have temperament. King Taklama sneered. He was not a rookie who had just gone to sea. How could he easily reveal the details of his abilities? In response, Dolag just snorted coldly. He was just giving it a try. After all, there were too many guys in the world who only used muscles and brains. Hey, why is it that as soon as this thought comes to mind, the image of that stupid old man picking his nose comes to mind? That's the end of the exchange, kid. King Taklama became a little impatient. He waved his palms glowing with green light in front of him, and rings of green light began to form one after another out of thin air behind him. They were densely packed and occupied a large space. Just by visual inspection, there are thousands of them, and they are still being generated. Be my slave and I will treat you well, ha 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 ha. The next moment, all the rings turned into green meteors amid his wild laughter, shooting out towards Dolag, overwhelming the sky. Wind Dragon protects you. Dorag immediately displayed his hurricane ability, and a simulated wind dragon appeared around him. Then the wind dragon broke away and turned into a raging green wind wall 10 meters in front. In front of all the rings, puff puff. It's just that this looks extremely spectacular, like the majestic wind wall of a green tsunami. Once it comes into contact, it is like a bubble film that is easily broken through by rings one after another. Although it cannot be said that it is like air and has no hindering effect, it does not stop the impact of the dense rings. At most, it slows down part of the speed due to the force of the wind. Seeing this scene, Dolag's face became ugly, but on the other side, King Taklama laughed without surprise. The competition between devil fruit abilities is based on the degree of training and development of it. Although the natural type is called the strongest of the three types, this alone cannot bridge the gap between us. So what? justice will eventually defeat evil. This time, the loser must be you. Dorag's eyes remained firm and fearless, he faced dense attacks from rings one after another. Surrounded by a green whirlwind, his whole body was dragging after images, concentrating all his attention to dodge. Justice? It's ridiculous. There are only masters and slaves in this world. The weak are slaves, the strong are masters, and the strongest is the master of everyone. And I, Taklama. King Taklama raised the Huang family's scepter high in his hand, looked at the scorching sun in the sky with the golden mask on his face, and expressed his greatest ambition. I will become the master of the entire world in the name of the slave king.